Coming to you live from the fireball that is Phoenix, Arizona, where we are roasting up some cybersecurity topics that matter to you and your business or organization. Cybersecurity, compliance, management, Net Concepts, helping your business achieve reliability, security, and productivity. And now, your host of Net Concepts, Aaron Wagner.
Hey there, this is Aaron Wagner from Net Concepts. And yes, we are definitely a fireball today. It's 113 degrees, and there's not a cloud really in the sky, and it's hot as heck. I'm here today with Ilia from Netwrix. If you could introduce yourself, sir.
Hey, Aaron. Thanks for having me. My name is Ilia Sotnikov. I work as a Vice President of Product Management for Netwrix Software Corporation.
Great. And I really, really enjoy working with your product, so it's a pleasure to have you on and kind of take a deeper dive and how that's going to help companies to look at insider threat, because September is the month of insider threat and awareness. I don't know what you're supposed to do for that. So like I was saying when we were offline, it's maybe I will wait till the middle of the week and delete everything off my server and just see if I hit panic mode or if I can get up and running quickly.
Or hopefully just recording this podcast is good enough for raising awareness.
True. All right, so we were going to look at some other case studies, and then earlier this week, an article dropped that talked about a Cisco engineer resigns, then nukes 16,000 WebEx accounts and 456 virtual machines. And
someone had a bad day at Cisco at that time. Sure,
was very unhappy. I mean, I'm sure it was a very bad day for a lot of people, but yeah. So it was a former Cisco employee who pleaded guilty to accessing the company's cloud infrastructure in 2018, 5 months after resigning, to deploy code that led to the shutdown of more than 16,000 WebEx Teams accounts and the deletion of 456 virtual machines, according to a plea agreement filed July 30th, 2020. The 30-year-old Sudish Kasaba Remish accused or accessed Cisco's cloud infrastructure hosted on Amazon's web service without permission on September 24th, 2018. He resigned from the company back in April, so he had access for several months. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that was almost half a year, right? And the worst thing is that most likely this could have been prevented, and that fascinates me most. How things like that could have been avoided, but still happen, and in security companies like Cisco.
Right, and let's talk about really quick what exactly your solution does to handle that kind of thing, because I'm sure that you have competitors out there that do something similar, but what does your solution do specifically that might help prevent that kind of attack?
Sure. So, before we go into the solution, I think there are several aspects of how you can look at the problem of insider threats. And as with a lot of things in security or in technology, actually, we can talk about three aspects of that: people, process, technology. So our solution is obviously software product, so we focus on the technology side of that, but technology alone cannot solve the bigger challenge of insider threat protection. If you look at the people aspect, there are things like trust and empowerment and background checks and all of that, which is more on the side of HR and executive management. Security teams or technology teams, IT, can contribute to that by contributing to security culture overall, building relations with the teams, or even within the team. In this case, this was an engineer who made this damage. So building the culture inside your team and making sure you hire the right people is always a good idea, but no one is guaranteed to not have a bad apple, unfortunately. So then on the process side, this is something that you can actually influence or establish, and this is very important. And there are a few things that you can do to minimize the risk of something like that happening. So thinking about the least privilege principle, making sure that you know what are the risky areas of your IT environment, understanding the value of different assets and different data sets to the business, understanding the consequences, and making sure that you, at any point in time, you know who has access to those parts of the environment and what potential damage can happen. Not only if the employee or ex-employee decides to act funny, but also accounts get compromised sometimes. So that's another aspect. And from the risk management perspective, least privilege is good not only for insider threats but also to minimize damage in case of an attack as well. So you kind of kill two birds with the same stone here. But also making sure that you keep that access rights in place by doing attestation or certification process, whatever you call it. Different companies use different language there. Making sure you have change control processes in place. So if access levels change, you need to make sure that they follow certain procedure. There are sign-offs, there are approvals, that kind of stuff. And then also being religious about account deprovisioning. So in this case, most likely what happens, certain accounts were not deprovisioned properly, or even worse, potentially certain shared accounts did not rotate passwords once the employee left the company, so he could still go into the company environment and make those changes. So those are the processes that you need to have in place, and some of them can be more or less manual or using the native tools, but then to be more efficient and to reduce the risk of mistakes or the risk of overlooking something, that's where technology comes in, and that's where Netwrix can help with our solutions. So Netwrix Auditor can help you with information about who has access where. You can automate delivery of those reports to the asset owners, to the business data owners, work with them to make sure they review and certify and confirm who should have and who should not have access to certain parts of the business. And then obviously not only what level of access they have and not only how they get this access directly or by group memberships or inheritance, so that nothing is hidden from you, but also what they do with that access. Do they use it? Do they log in there? Do they read data? Or do they act differently from how they have been acting in the past? So noticing any deviations that can be suspicious. So we try to help with all of that to make sure that you can automate those controls. You can build that environment where you know who has access where, how they're using this access, and spot potential anomalies and risky behaviors.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point, too. And that's, a lot of us admins tend to think of software and how that software is going to make my job easier, but we don't really go outside of that idea of, okay, well, there's also processes that they need to be put in place, like, for example, the separation of duties, or like you were talking about with how you work with the HR department to make sure that when somebody's terminated, that there's a process that, okay, that triggers boom, I need to deactivate the account immediately. And there's a lot there that from this article that's missing, obviously, and we can only assume that those kinds of things fell apart.
Right. And again, some parts of it you can automate through integration between HR systems and whatever your identity management system is, or whatever your authentication system is. And in most cases, this is Microsoft Active Directory in many enterprises. So sometimes you can potentially build some sort of automation there. But to be honest, this is not always possible either, because there is that requires too much custom development, and maintenance becomes too costly, or you may not have talent, or you just may not have enough expertise to maintain that. So just making sure that you have the process, making sure that you have ability to see what is happening, and you have checks in place where you can verify that things like account deprovisioning or decommissioning happen is important. So yeah, I totally agree there.
And I think you always, it's a good practice to always assume that things are going to fail, especially when we're talking about automation.
Yeah, you cannot rely on that 100%. You still need to have some feedback mechanism that tells you, yes, whatever was supposed to happen happened in reality. So we actually have clients that use our reports kind of side by side with their change tracking system or change management system, where they periodically or regularly compare the list of changes that were submitted to IT or to help desk as tickets and resolved by IT, so changes supposedly made and tracked properly through the process, and then the reports from Netwrix auditor that show what actually happened in reality, so that that whatever changes happened to group memberships, to permissions, to accounts, and enabling, disabling, creating new accounts, things like that, they actually match to what was supposed to happen and what got documented properly. So that's a good practice as well.
And I'd like to read this paragraph from the Celebration of Insider Threat Awareness Month article. So, in fact, behavior-based security analytics provider, I guess that's crucial, over 70% of all enterprises possess a vulnerability to insider threats. 40% of enterprise respondents said that they didn't detect an insider threat during or after it moves data outside the network. And another report from SolarWinds found that nearly 62% of enterprise IT and non-IT respondents cite user errors as their top cybersecurity insider threat.
Yeah, those and those numbers are not very encouraging, right?
No. And like you said, it's also whatever the number of the respondents are, you can multiply that by possibly 2 or. How about this?
Yeah, so obviously not unlike data breaches that happen as a result of an attack that typically must be disclosed depending on what kind of data, depending on the jurisdiction, but at least there is some visibility into that. The results of the insider threats and the incidents that are kind of resulting from a user error, mistake, someone fat fingered an email address, or just used with the proliferation of online sharing tool, just shared the wrong site on SharePoint with the wrong person outside of the company. Those things are sometimes caught and not always reported. So we don't know the full scale of that. That's for sure.
And I know many companies don't have a process to label certain information, whether it be sensitive or whatever, whether you can share it or not.
Yeah, that's another challenge. And, like a lot of time it has been said that you cannot protect what you don't know about. So in many cases, when you talk to the companies and you ask them what kind of data the company handles, depending on what they do, they will tell you they have employee data, they have customer data, it can be health information, can be payment and financial information, so some sort of regulated data. And with the proliferation of the privacy laws now, pretty much every company starts to handle data that all of a sudden is protected under certain laws. So this is more and more relevant to everyone. And just the simple thing, being able to tell where this kind of data that you should be protecting under the law, where it exists in the company is difficult, because you may have a central system or an application or a database that supports this application that contains personal data, employee data, customer data, whatever it is. But then what happens if someone exports a report from that system? Where does that go? Do you know if they use that Excel spreadsheets to create additional information? I don't know, build some nice chart for their PowerPoint presentation for the quarterly business review, and then just saved that Excel with full details of every transaction or every patient or whatever kind of data they have there to a shared drive, to a SharePoint, to SharePoint online sites, to a Teams chat, whatever it is. You literally need to be able to identify those cases, because if you are not aware of this, you're putting your organization at risk, and you don't have a good way to protect from that risk.
Yeah, I mean, not only as the IT person, you may not know what data you have, what types of data you have, but I mean, even think about the fact that insider threat isn't always about being malicious. The user may not know, well, what am I supposed to do with this data? Am I allowed to share it?
Yeah, totally. One of the reports that Netwrix has, and this is a combination of information from Netwrix data classification and Netwrix auditor, allows you to see overexposed data of certain types. So as a result of classification, if you have personal information or payment information, but what we allow you to see really quickly is highlight of SharePoint sites or file shares that are open to catch-all groups like everyone or all authenticated users that contain any documents that were classified as containing that sort of information that should be protected. And it's amazing how in the first, even in proof of concept kind of deployment or as the result of the first deployment, customers just run that report, see that list, and immediately know they have some work to do for the next few hours to fix that without breaking any business processes. So it can be challenging and eye-opening in some cases.
I'm sure there's some tears shed and maybe some screaming.
Yeah, we won't talk too much about that.
So another thing too is that the percentage of companies that have suffered, and then again they use the term malicious insiders, but like I said, it's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just ignorance. But from 2016 it was 25%. From 2017 it was 28%. 2018 it was 34%. So we can safely assume that at least 35% of companies have experienced some kind of insider threat incident in 2019.
Yeah, and it's difficult because you obviously you can take measures to to minimize that risk, to minimize the exposure, like you were talking about separation of duties, controlling access rights, all of that. But that's the challenge with the insider risk. You cannot completely remove all the access because, hey, these people have to do their job. They need access to systems. They need access to applications. They need access to data. So the challenge there is to kind of spot that moment and to detect that moment when the activity goes from normal business activity to something that is out of usual without distracting the employees who are actually well-intended and well-behaving. But it's a very subtle difference there sometimes. And sometimes you can easily spot that. Like, if you see thousands of files being downloaded from SharePoint by a user to their local machine, yes, you can go and ask questions, right? And sometimes that would be a completely valid reason. They are reorganizing their, folder structure or something, just for more intuitive navigation. I've done that with the SharePoint sites for my team a couple times over the last few years. So I'm pretty sure that there are reasons to do something like that in some cases, but not always. And that's where you need to have those mechanisms to notify and alert when something like that happens out of usual, out of normal processes, where you can go and have the conversation. You don't need to be, as the security person or as the IT person, you don't need to block or stop that activity because there may be a valid reason. And, depending on the sensitivity of the data or the level of protection, you may want to speak to the person's immediate manager or supervisor or just to the person directly to understand what's going on and maybe help them. Maybe they're doing something that is not optimal and can lead to those mistakes that can expose this data. So yeah, it is not a trivial task to protect from the insider threats. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's this interesting thought that popped in my head while you were talking about when I went from being a network administrator to more of a security person. And that is that, we as IT people exist because of the business. So the business makes money, and that is the purpose of why they're there, but we are there to support it. We're not there, you get caught in your mind and you're like, well, I need to prevent everything that could cause damage. And you often lose sight of the fact that you're supposed to be there supporting whatever practice they're trying to do. So,
yeah, totally agree. And yeah, it takes obviously some experience and some level of maturity to get to that thought. And as you start in IT, you focus on the task at hand and the fires to fight and things to fix on your list. And you don't always have time to kind of put your head up and look around and understand the wider context of it.
Yeah, and I'll give you a good example of where I've experienced exactly what you were talking about. Sales staff that moved, they just get move happy with folders. And then next thing you know, they're moving this gigantic tree of stuff from one folder to another, and they don't understand the implication of what they just did, and then they have floods of activity, and that's where I've seen it multiple times.
Yeah, well, and hopefully that was not replicated and changes across the WAN network to another site or something like that. That could easily saturate that network.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. But That's
okay. That sounds familiar.
But that's one of those times when you want to cry or scream or something. So
yeah.
And another interesting stat from 2018 and 2019 is the average cost of insider attacks keep rising, and it went the average of 1.4 million in 2018 to 1.6 million in 2019. That's a lot of money.
One big difference between outsider attacker and an insider is that insiders actually know where the important stuff is, right? They know where they can hit you the hardest. For the attackers that come from the outside, they need to get into the environment. They need time to look around, to learn, what you have, how to get to that, move laterally, escalate privileges, things like that. So as the defender, you typically have more chances and higher chances, more opportunities to detect those kinds of activity, from intrusion, through lateral movement, through privilege escalation. There are just more actions that they perform. And the challenge with the insiders, if they decide to harm you, they already, in many cases, already have access to that data or to that part of the environment, and they already know where the important stuff is. So that's definitely a challenge. You don't have as many chances to spot that abnormal activity, and you kind of have to have these good detection capabilities, being able to spot this activity that goes out of usual, and maybe be a little bit more, in some cases, overcautious to check those alerts and make sure whether this is an incident or not.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example too of exactly what you're talking about. Is about a year ago, this guy did a presentation at one of these cybersecurity get-togethers. I got a buddy of mine that likes to go to these things just for the free food, but we go and we watch this speaker, and he's talking about how all these companies in cybersecurity have these military names, these fancy military names, but they don't behave. He brought up the cost of cybersecurity threats overall, not just specifically insider threats, and then the cost of intellectual property theft, and the number is just astronomically huge. And he said, we don't think like a military unit, because one of the things that you want to do, number one, is to know your network better than the bad guy. So that includes knowing who the vendors are, know who your employees are working with. Get a real sense of who, not just the network, but who they're working with.
Yeah, no, this is important, and I don't know how you where you put the contractors contractor accounts that can be used for the attack, whether you put that into the insider threat bucket or the outsider. But that's another group of users and accounts that have access to your environment, have access to your network. But those are not the people that you hired. Those are not people that you that went through your process of verification, whatever it is. If you have any background checks, not everyone does that. But that's at least, with your own employees, you have that chance to talk and understand how they fit and what you can expect from them. When you let someone else into your environment, you don't have that experience, and you have to trust your partner or your supplier or your services provider that they hire the right people. So, and you give them access to your network, you have to, because there are tasks that you just cannot do on your own. So that's another aspect of that.
Yeah, and he's also talking about, understanding the behavior of every one of those vendors, how they interact with your company. So, is it normal for that particular person from that company to be sending so-and-so an invoice, for example? And if the answer is no, then, well, don't open it.
Right. So, yeah, this goes into the security culture and trainings and awareness.
Right.
In my experience from the companies I've worked with, these trainings definitely work much better when they are not just generic kind of security trainings. So be aware, think before you click, that kind of stuff. But when you do what you just described there, and when you tie that to the specific workflows that a particular department has or particular employee has, so that it is kind of resonating with their daily routine, so that you not only tell them what to think about, but you put it into the context of their environment, their tools, their processes. This definitely sticks much better and resonates much better with them.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the training is absolutely critical. There's a post that I did on my LinkedIn about the exploits for multi-factor. So, at the end of the day, you can put in all these different security pieces, but if you don't have training, you don't have a whole lot of protection, because it always comes down to your employees as your first line of defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to share this last thing before I start asking you the personal questions. But so Kaspersky did a study, and their exploit distribution stats for quarter 2 2020, which I really like the fact that it's very, very recent. So 72% of the applications was Office 365 of the vulnerable applications within a network.
Yeah, so it's a bit difficult with Microsoft and the way how they report. So Microsoft now reports all the client-side applications from Office also as part of Office 365. So I guess those vulnerabilities mostly are unpatched Outlook, Excel, Word, that kind of stuff.
Well, I know there's
more likely than not. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one vulnerability in Teams that they're just not going to fix, and it's a vulnerability that has to do with WebDAV. Like the URL location for a WebDAV. So that's vulnerable.
Yeah, the protocol itself.
But they call it a feature.
I guess it depends on how you look at this.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can map a folder to a malicious site. So that's one of the vulnerabilities. The other thing, too, and that's interesting about this chart, is that, you hear all the time about vulnerabilities in Adobe. Adobe is always patching their stuff. And yet PDFs or Acrobat itself was only 7% of the vulnerable applications in quarter 2 2020. Actually 7.9.
Yeah. So I think it depends a lot on the distribution. Like most of the vulnerabilities in Adobe products are probably not coming from the reader, like the simplest and free tier of what they offer. and you don't really see the full Acrobat on every workstation, unlike Office applications or Office client applications. So it might be just the availability of and the scope reduced by just the number of workstations where this technology is deployed, I guess.
So I asked you this question, and I'm writing it in context to the 72% of vulnerabilities in Office 365 and the fact that, if that's where most of the insider threat vulnerabilities are coming from, how does Netwrix help in this area?
Well, great question, and we definitely try to help companies to automate their processes around identifying the risks, discovering what kinds of data they have, understanding where it might be overexposed, who has access to what, do they need to have that access, do they actually use it, and then all the way through from highlighting the risks to understanding and detecting abnormal activities, any kind of dangerous behaviors, any kind of mass changes or downloads or changes to configuration or access settings that can expose data. So in a nutshell, that's where we try to help as much as we can, identifying the risks and then helping, giving you the information you need, actionable information to fix that, to improve your protection, improve your posture, and then from there all the way through detection and understanding when and seeing and knowing when something goes wrong, so that you can actually respond and, if necessary, recover.
And I'm going to add one other aspect to that is that when you have because Office 365 does have a pretty good auditing suite, if you will. It's just the more places that you got to go to find that information, it's really hard. I mean, you've got to stay on top of all the different subjects that we've talked about, and now you got to go to a different portal to look at that particular data. It just makes it a whole lot more difficult.
Yeah, I'll mention another aspect here. In most environments that we see with our clients, very rarely we see a pure cloud deployment like the company that has all of their work and processes in the cloud already. So a lot of people are still in some sort of hybrid mode with some workloads running in the cloud, some workload like Office 365, and then other workloads running on premises. They may have groups of users, or larger companies that are growing through acquisitions may have different parts of the environment in different setups. So, like you said, having multiple tools, multiple audit trails in different locations, different consoles is difficult, and the risk of overlooking something and not reacting properly grows as this complexity and number of systems you have to look for is growing as well. So being able to get the single audit trail across multiple systems is definitely important. So I appreciate you bringing this up.
Now, the reason that we found your company in the first place was we were looking for ways to automate and deal with compliance. So how does Netwrix help in that area?
So you're not alone, and a lot of companies come to us from that need of automating their compliance controls. And it's an age-old debate. Compliance versus security, which comes first, and we don't want to debate that. We want to be able to help in whatever scenario you have and whatever level of security maturity you have and how you see it. So I have talked to multiple clients of our solutions and users of our solutions that range from people who just want to tick a checkbox and say, hey, tell me which report I subscribe to be compliant. Literally, I had conversations like that. And we try to help with that. We try to give you guidance on, what are the aspects of your environment that you may want to look after, pay attention to as part of your compliance efforts. We try to build predefined reports, predefined alerts, configurations that will help you with that. Predefined rules for data classification, data categorization that maps to specific compliance requirements like PCI DSS or HIPAA or GLBA if you are in finance and banking, and so on and so forth. So we definitely try to do that, but we don't stop there, and we give you the flexibility. We give you all the instruments so that you can tweak and tune whatever we have out of the box and adjust that to your frameworks, to your security controls. And wherever possible, we want you to be able to use the same instruments for both compliance and security at the same time, so that you don't have to overinvest, so that you can get maximum value from what you are buying.
So I asked this question, just throwing it out there. Is there a tangible cost savings that you can demonstrate with your automation and consolidating from looking at multiple portals and blah, blah, blah?
So this is always a difficult question when you ask anyone to measure the returns on security investment. And the way I think about this is that any investment in security, whether we talk about people, processes, or technology, I think it is not fair to only talk about the returns in the way of cost saving. Mm-hmm. So obviously we can talk about operational cost savings, and it is probably the simplest way to calculate. If we automate this, it saves us whatever X hours every month. We know the average salary of the security analyst or of the admin that had to do that manual work, so we can calculate the results or the returns. This allows us to reduce the amount of data that we keep. And again, you can convert that into storage size and convert that into dollars. So yeah, this is easier to calculate. I think it is not fair because that's not the reason why security investment exists in the first place. Because the biggest reason for you to actually invest in security tools is to reduce the risk. And that's where you need to do a little bit more work to try and measure that. And there are different approaches to that. There are different ways to assess the risk, to make that assessment of what is the risk reduction and how you put that all into the formula to actually see what are the real returns. But I think it is important to, at least with some measure of certainty, to try and calculate that, because if you only look at the operational cost savings, I think you're doing yourself as the security leader, if we talk from the perspective of the security budget owners, you are doing yourself a disservice by kind of reducing the importance of security as the practice to just reducing the operational costs. This is not right. There are obviously compliance aspects of that. So there are, you can calculate the potential risk of fines. You can look at some of the reports that you mentioned already, where there is the average cost of the breach. Like IBM and Ponemon Institute published this annual cost of data breach report, which breaks it down by geography and size of the organization and vertical. So you can try to kind of calculate the expected loss based on the available data there. So there are resources for that.
I appreciate your answer on that. That's great. I think we're about out of time, so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. It's great. And if you want to know more about Netwrix, please drop us an email or go to our website, ncarizona.net, or catch us on LinkedIn. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Net Concepts with your host, Aaron Wagner. For more info, please go to ncarizona.net. Net Concepts, helping your business achieve reliability, security, and productivity.